Wyoming Territory, 1879. The sun was barely over the slopes when Delaney Norwood was married for the second time. This time with no vows of love, no warm hands wrapped around her fingers, just her name spoken in a dry courthouse, beside a man who barely looked at her. Her black dress clung to her like a second skin, heavy with dust and grief. She had buried Samuel 3 weeks ago on the hill behind the house, next to the cottonwood he planted the spring after they wed. He had died in a cattle stampede gone wrong, too many hooves, too many rocks, and no time to run. Now she stood beside his brother, Owen, the man who had taken Samuel's place in the house, in the barn, and now, by force of law and local pressure, in her life. "You got two choices, Delaney," the judge had said, not unkindly. "You keep the land, but you marry the next of kin. Or you lose it. And your boys, too." They were not her boys by blood, but they were hers in every other way. Samuel's sons from a first wife long gone, Orrin, 9, and little Ollie, 6. They clung to her skirts every night, cried for her when the nightmares came. She had held them through fevers, taught them their letters, carved their names into the barn beam with a nail the day they called her Mama for the first time. So she said "I do" with a voice that barely carried, and Owen Brewer put his hand on her back like he was claiming a prize. He was not evil, just cold. A man who did not smile, did not speak unless necessary, and looked at her like she was something owed, not something loved. He had not touched her, not yet, but there was a silence between them that left her stomach clenched every time she heard his boots on the floorboards. The boys were confused, quiet, unsure whether they were allowed to run to her anymore. And the house, once full of humming and hearth warmth, now felt like a waiting room for something worse. She took to walking in the late afternoons, when Owen was out riding the fence lines. It was on one of those walks that she saw him. He was standing by the creek below the ridge, washing dust off his hands, a dark bay horse grazing behind him. He was tall, lean, sun-browned, with a rifle slung across his back and a battered hat shading his face. He looked up when he heard her boots on the dry grass. Delaney froze. Strangers were rare out here. He gave a nod, respectful, not too familiar. "Afternoon, ma'am." She nodded back, one hand resting on the hem of her skirt. "You passing through?" "Looking for work." He glanced toward the hills, then back at her. "Name's Fletcher Boone. Heard the Brewer place might need hands." Her breath caught. "That's my land." He raised an eyebrow but did not question it. "Then maybe you're the one I should be talking to." She studied him. There was something honest in his face. "Tired, maybe, but not hard." "We are not hiring." "Understood." He tipped his hat, turned to his horse. But her voice stopped him. "You served." He turned back. "Texas Cavalry. 5 years." "You." "My husband. The first one. Died on a cow drive." His eyes softened. "I am sorry, ma'am." She nodded once. Then, surprising even herself, she said, "You can come by tomorrow." To talk to Owen. He showed up just after dawn. The boys watched him from the porch steps as he tied his horse near the barn and walked up with steady steps. Owen barely glanced at him before putting him to work hauling fence posts. By noon, Fletcher had sweat through his shirt and earned a spot at the table. Delaney served stew in silence. Fletcher thanked her quietly, and Orrin moved to sit beside him without being told. Owen just grunted. That night, she stood by the window, watching the moonlight spill over the hills. Fletcher was sleeping in the barn, by his own request. Said he liked the quiet. Said he did not mind the hay. The days passed. Fletcher stayed. He worked hard, was good with the boys, gentle with horses, respectful with her. Never asked questions. Never pushed. But he looked at her, really looked. Not like he owned her. Like he saw her. One evening she found him in the barn mending a broken stirrup. "You always alone?" she asked. He looked up, set the leather aside. "Most of the time." "Why?" He studied her face. "My mother died when I was a boy. My father drank himself out of every town he touched. I got used to leaving before anyone asked me to stay." She stepped forward, voice low. "You do not have to leave here." He stood slowly, that same quiet patience in his eyes. "Is that what you want?" She did not answer. She just turned and walked back toward the house. But something shifted that night. The air between them grew warmer, heavier, like the first clouds before a summer storm. The next week, Owen came home drunk from the saloon. It was the first time he had taken a horse out in days. He slammed the door open, staggered inside, and grabbed Delaney's wrist hard enough to leave a bruise. "You think I do not see it?" he hissed. "You think I do not see the way he looks at you?" Oren screamed. Ollie started crying. "Let go of me," Delaney said, voice sharp. "You are my wife. I never chose that." Before Owen could speak again, Fletcher was their boots pounding up the steps, rifle forgotten, hands clenched. "Let her go," he said, voice low and dangerous. Owen laughed. "This does not concern you." Fletcher hit him. It was not a wild punch. It was clean, fast, and Owen dropped like a sack of grain. The boys stared, wide-eyed. Delaney stood still, shaking, her wrist red. Fletcher looked at her. "You all right?" She nodded. "Yes." Owen groaned, rolling onto his side. Fletcher's voice was cold. "You touch her again, I will not stop with one punch." Delaney pulled the boys close, her eyes on Fletcher. That night, Owen left. Packed up and rode out before the sun rose. Left no note. The silence he left behind felt like relief. But the law was still the law. A marriage license still sat in the drawer. And Delaney, for the first time in weeks, felt the fear of that paper pressing down on her. Fletcher found her in the garden the next day, her hands buried in the earth. "You all right?" he asked gently. She looked up at him, dirt on her cheeks, her voice quiet. "I want to be free." He crouched beside her. "Then I will help you. You do not have to." "I want to." She looked into his eyes, and for the first time since Samuel's death, she felt something real. Something living. Hope. And the way Fletcher looked at her steady, warm, certain made her believe it was possible. The morning after Owen left, the house held a strange stillness. Not hollow, but expectant, like spring after a long, brutal winter. Delaney stood at the stove, sleeves rolled, apron damp at the waist. Ollie sat at the table with a slate and chalk, his tongue poking out in concentration. Oren hauled in kindling from the woodpile, boots thumping a steady rhythm across the floorboards. No one asked where Owen had gone. No one needed to. Fletcher didn't come in for breakfast. She found him later behind the barn, digging out a patch of stony earth with a spade. A thin frame of pine boards leaned beside him. "What's that?" she asked. He rested the spade against his boot. "Chicken coop. You've got hens, but no shelter for 'em come snow." "Figured I'd get ahead." She crossed her arms, brow furrowed. "You plan on staying through winter?" He didn't smile, just met her eyes. "If I'm welcome." She hesitated, then reached for the spade. "Then let me help." They worked in tandem, hours folding into each other. Fletcher measured wood with a carpenter's eye, notching corners with slow precision. Delaney held board steady while he hammered. She didn't speak much, but when she did, her voice was easier than it had been in weeks. By midday, they paused to rest under the cottonwood. She handed him a tin cup of water. He drank, then wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "You ever build one before?" she asked. "Helped a black family down in Kansas. Freed folks. They traded me a mule for the work. Best trade I ever made." Her brow lifted. "You travel much?" "Mostly west. Never stayed long in one place. Started to feel like I was chasing something I didn't have the name for." She traced the rim of her cup. "And now?" He looked at her, quiet for a beat too long. "Now I think I know what it was." She set the tin down beside her boot. "You ever want to be a father?" That caught him. He sat straighter. "I don't know. I guess I never thought it was meant for me. Oren asks about you. Says you teach better than his pa ever did." Fletcher pressed his fingers against his knee. "I don't want to take what's not mine." "You're not taking. You're giving." The wind stirred the branches overhead, loose leaves spinning down like ash. She didn't look at him again. Not right away. But she didn't move either. Later that week, the circuit judge came through town. Delaney hitched the wagon and drove into town with both boys and a letter she'd written in private. Fletcher watched her go from the barn's loft, one hand resting on the beam. He didn't ask what the letter said. He didn't need to. She came back just before dusk, lips wind-chapped, cheeks ruddy. She passed him a folded slip of parchment with a wax seal broken. "The judge says the marriage was not binding," she said. "No witness, no consummation, and no intent to continue it. He'll send word to Cheyenne to have it struck." Fletcher didn't touch the paper. "That what you want?" She nodded. "It's what's right." Fletcher exhaled, slow and deep. "Then you're free." She looked up at him, eyes steady. "Not yet." He waited. "I still live in the house Samuel built. Still wear black each Sunday. Still wake up sometimes thinking he'll be in the next room." She stepped closer. "But when I look at you, I don't feel guilt. I feel like I'm breathing again." His voice was rough. "I don't want to be something you lean on just to get through. You're not." She touched his fingers, just barely. "You're something I chose." That night, she didn't sleep in the back room. She didn't need to. The boys were already drifting into comfort. Orrin asked Fletcher to help him with a slingshot. Ollie fell asleep in his lap during a thunderstorm. Delaney watched them from the doorway, arms folded, a look on her face that was not sadness and not quite peace, but something halfway between. After supper, Fletcher sat with her on the porch steps, the sky turning lavender above the ridge. He didn't reach for her hand, but she rested it between them, near enough that his pinky brushed hers. "Tell me something true," she said. He stared out at the field. "I never planned to stay anywhere long enough to matter. But now I think if I left, it'd be the worst mistake I ever made." She leaned her shoulder against his. "Then don't." He didn't. That autumn, they added 2 more horses to the barn. Fletcher carved a cradle for the parlor just in case. Orrin read aloud in the evenings, proud to get through a whole chapter without stumbling. Ollie named the rooster Cinders. And Delaney hung her black dress in the back of the wardrobe and stopped counting the days since Samuel's death. She had begun counting something else. Something forward-facing. Something alive. The first snow came before the wheat was fully threshed. Fletcher had tarred the barn roof in time, and the coop stood sturdy behind the woodshed. But the cellar shelves were only half full, and the salt pork hadn't yet arrived from town. Delaney paced the kitchen, arms crossed under her shawl. "We'll need to stretch the flour. No biscuits at breakfast till the wagon comes." Fletcher leaned against the doorframe, dusting hay from his sleeves. "I'll ride in tomorrow. Take Orrin along. Let him pick out the sugar cones." "He'll like that," she said, turning toward the stove. "He's been restless since the cold set in." Fletcher stepped in farther, voice quieter now. "I could take both boys. You could have the house to yourself a day." Her hands stilled above the kettle. "I wouldn't know what to do with a day to myself." He smiled, just barely. "Figure it out. Read. Nap. Sit still." "Sit still," she repeated like the words were foreign. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. The season had turned hard and fast, and with it came the hush that winter brought to the prairie. Days shortened. Fires burned longer. And in the quiet corners of the house, something warmer than hearth smoke started to settle between them. That night, Delaney found Fletcher oiling the hinges on the boys' bedroom door. He didn't look up when she came in, just kept working the cloth along the iron. "You were raised near San Antonio, weren't you?" she asked. He nodded once. "On a dry patch west of town. Mesquite and limestone, nothing green after April." "What made you leave?" He sat back on his heels. "My father's land was taken while he was drunk in town. Signed it off for a fifth of whiskey. When I came back from the war, there wasn't anything left worth staying for." She leaned against the wall, arms folded. "You ever talk about him?" "Not much to say. He taught me how to skin a rabbit and sharpen a blade. After that, not a lot of kindness passed between us." She let the silence stretch, then said, "You're nothing like him." He stood slowly, wiping his hands on a rag. "I try not to be." In the days that followed, the house settled into a rhythm. Fletcher rose before dawn to check the horses. Delaney hung dried apples above the stove. Orrin chopped kindling under Fletcher's watchful eye, and Ollie fell asleep every night curled between his quilt and a wooden horse Fletcher had carved from scrap pine. One morning, Delaney found herself humming while sweeping the parlor. She hadn't meant to. The sound startled her, small and bright in the empty room. She paused, broomstill in hand. Fletcher stepped through the front door, brushing frost from his collar. That a melody I know? I don't think so, she said. My mother used to hum it when she was mending clothes. I hadn't thought of it in years. He set down his gloves. You ever think about writing some of your own? She blinked at him. Songs? Stories? You've got a way of noticing things most folks miss. I barely finished school. So did I, he said. Doesn't mean we don't have something worth saying. She looked at him then, really looked. You ever think about staying for good? He didn't answer right away. He stepped closer, slow and sure. I've thought of little else since the first frost. Her breath hitched, but she didn't step back. You'd be tied to this land. I'd be tied to you, he said. She reached for his hand, fingers cold from the morning air. You sure? I've never been more. That winter, they moved the boys' cots to the east bedroom and cleared space in the parlor for a small desk. Fletcher built it by hand. Delaney set a stack of paper beside it, borrowed from the schoolhouse in town. Each night, after the boys were asleep, she wrote by lamplight. Not stories, not yet, but memories. The year her father drowned crossing the Platte. The first time Samuel brought her coffee in bed. The day Orrin scraped his knee and asked her to kiss it better, like she'd always been his. Fletcher read them, careful and quiet, his hand steady on her back. You've carried more than most, he said once. I'm not the only one, she replied. He kissed her just after the last snow melted, when the creek broke open and the fields turned soft again. It was not rushed. It was not uncertain. It was like the rain after a long drought, quiet, steady, and needed. By spring, the townsfolk had stopped asking where Owen Brewer had gone. The judge never brought it up again. And when the preacher passed through on Easter, he married Fletcher and Delaney under the cottonwood. The boys standing between them, clean shirts tucked in tight. There were no flowers, no guests, no music. But when Fletcher said her name, he said it like a promise. And when Delaney took his hand, she held it like it was something she'd earned. By early May, the cottonwood behind the house had begun to leaf out in full, and the wind carried the scent of damp soil and the faint sweetness of wild plum blossoms from the ravine. Fletcher stood at the edge of the lower field, sleeves rolled past his elbows, eyes fixed on the rows of young corn just beginning to break the surface. Delaney joined him with a basket on her hip, cloth tucked over the loaves she'd pulled from the oven before sunup. They're late coming up, she said, squinting toward the fence line. He nodded. Soil's still cold down deep. Needs another week of warmth. She set the basket on a flat stone and unwrapped one of the loaves. I used the last of the sorghum. Might ride in next week, trade for more. Fletcher brushed his hand along the top of a sprouting stalk. You want me to go with you? No, she said, then softened it. Not this time. I'd like a day by myself. Maybe stop by the schoolhouse. Miss Elbin asked last month if I'd help set up her new shelves. He didn't question it, just took the loaf she offered and tore a piece free. You always been good with tools? I had 4 younger brothers, she said, easing down onto the grass. When a roof leaked, it wasn't Papa who patched it. He was too proud to climb a ladder with bad knees. He lowered beside her, elbows on his knees. You ever think about going back east? She shook her head. I wouldn't know what to do with polished streets and gas lamps. This land's in my bones. The sun warmed her back and she pulled a stalk of yellowed grass between her fingers. My youngest brother writes sometimes from St. Louis. Says we should come visit. But I don't think he understands what it means to grow something with your hands. Fletcher chewed, then said, You miss your people? She answered slowly. Sometimes. But I've built my life here. I don't feel pulled away. A hawk circled above the far ridge, its cry cutting through the breeze. Fletcher's gaze followed it. You ever want more? He asked. Delaney turned her head. More what? He hesitated. A bigger family. Another child. She looked down at her hands, thumb tracing a groove in her palm. I used to think I couldn't. After Samuel, nothing happened. I stopped expecting it. He watched her carefully, not pressing. But lately, she said, voice quieter now, I've wondered if the days feel different because something's changing in me. He didn't speak, only reached over and touched the back of her hand, firm and steady. I'll know soon enough, she added, eyes meeting his. And if it's true, I want to be ready. That evening, Orrin came in with a split lip and a scuffed elbow. Delaney knelt beside the basin, wiping dirt from his cheek. What happened? Louis Riggins said I ain't got a real father, he muttered. Fletcher crouched behind her. And what did you say? Orrin's eyes brimmed, but he didn't let the tears fall. I said I didn't need one. I've got someone better. Delaney paused, cloth soaking in the basin. Fletcher laid a hand on the boy's shoulder. You did right not to strike back, he said. I didn't, Orrin said. But I told him he doesn't get to talk about my family. Not when he don't know anything. That night, Fletcher took the boys out to the barn to show them how to oil saddle leather. Delaney watched from the porch, arms folded, a quiet weight in her chest. Later, when the lamps were low and the boys had drifted off near the hearth, she stood barefoot in the kitchen, watching Fletcher set a strip of jerky on the sill to dry. I spoke with the preacher, she said, voice low. He turned, brow lifting. He asked if I'd help with the widow's ledger. I told him I'd think on it. She stepped closer. But I want your thoughts. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. You ever done that kind of work? I know how to track stores and measure grain. And I know what it feels like to be left with nothing but a name and a legal paper that doesn't mean a thing. He nodded once. Then you'd be the right one to do it. She exhaled, a long breath she hadn't known she was holding. I'd only go once a week. Take the wagon in early, be back before dark. I'll have supper waiting, he said. She smiled without looking down. You always know what to say, don't you? No, he answered. But I know how to listen. Outside, the first frogs had begun their song along the creek, and the smell of warming earth drifted in through the open door. Delaney stepped into the circle of his arms, leaned her forehead against his chest. We're not the same people we were, she said. No, he agreed. But I like who we're becoming. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in years, she didn't brace herself for what came next. She simply rested there, in the quiet strength of what they had built. By midsummer, the air settled heavy with heat, and the smell of sun-warmed hay clung to skin and hair. Fletcher had taken to rising before the first bird call to tend the pasture while the ground still held its night chill. Delaney, already thickened at the waist, moved more slowly now, but she kept to her routines, tending the garden, sewing by the open window, checking that the boys washed behind their ears before supper. She felt steady, rooted, but not idle. At the schoolhouse on Tuesdays, she helped Miss Elbin copy ledgers and sort supplies, her presence quiet but certain. Her name was passed gently among the women in town, not just as a widow who'd managed, but as someone who knew how to make a life from what others might walk away from. One evening, after the boys had gone to bed and the lantern was trimmed low, Fletcher brought in a folded paper from his saddlebag. I ran into an old hand from my cavalry days at the mercantile, he said, settling beside her on the settee. He works up near Casper now, fixing wagons. Said there's a smithy they're looking to sell out. Offered me a share if I'd come in on it. Delaney set her darning aside and turned toward him fully. Would you want that? She asked. I might have, he said. Once. Before here. She watched him, searching. You don't have to stay out of obligation. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. This isn't duty, Delaney. Not for me. I've worked 100 places and left everyone without looking back. This is the first time I've ever thought about what it means to grow old somewhere. She reached out and touched the side of his neck, her hand warm against the sun-darkened skin. Then let's grow old here. He kissed her then, gently, the way someone drinks from a well they never thought they'd find. In August, the baby came. It was a long labor, made longer by the heat that clung to the walls and the way Ollie kept tiptoeing to the door to ask if it was time yet. Fletcher kept water cold over the well stone and held Delaney's hand through each wave. She didn't cry out. She didn't need to. When the pain passed, she gripped his wrist hard and said, We're naming her Anna. He nodded, brushing a damp curl from her brow. After your mother? Yes, she whispered. And because it feels like something whole. Anna Brewer arrived just before midnight, pink and furious and perfect. The boys stood outside the bedroom door when the midwife beckoned them in, their eyes wide as they peered at the bundle in their father's arms. Fletcher crouched low to show them. "She's got your nose, Orrin." Ollie reached out a finger, then pulled it back, grinning. "She's smaller than the barn cat." Delaney, pale but smiling, watched them all from the bed, her hand curled around the edge of the quilt Fletcher had stitched from scraps the previous spring. The room smelled of lavender and wood smoke and something new. By the harvest, Anna had grown into a quiet baby with a deep gaze. Delaney carried her in a soft sling when she walked the rows, humming low as she checked the squash and beans. Fletcher repaired the fence line with Ollie trailing behind, asking questions about hammers and hoofs. Orrin spent long afternoons reading beneath the cottonwood, one eye always on the house. One afternoon, Delaney found Fletcher in the barn sanding a cradle rocker smooth. "You already built her one," she said, leaning against the post. "This one's for Miss Elbin," he said. "She's taking in her cousin's child come fall. Figured she'd need something sturdy." Delaney smiled. "You're a good man, Fletcher." He looked up at her, saw the way the light caught the edge of her hair. "You taught me how to be a better one." That night, they sat on the porch as the sun sank low over the ridge, Anna dozing in Delaney's arms. The boys chased fireflies in the yard, their laughter rising like birdsong. Fletcher reached over and took her free hand. "You ever wonder how it all ended up this way?" She turned to him, eyes soft. "Every day. And every day I'm glad it did." He kissed her temple, then her mouth, slow and full. They didn't speak after that, not for a long while. They just sat, side by side, wrapped in the hush of evening and the rhythm of a life they'd made from loss and choice and the quiet, persistent work of love. Years passed. The cottonwood grew wide enough to shade the whole yard by noon, and the house expanded by one room to hold Orrin's books and Ollie's sketches. Anna learned to ride before her 5th birthday, and Fletcher built a swing from hemp rope and an old yoke beam. Delaney's hair silvered at the temples, and Fletcher's knees stiffened in the mornings, but their hands still found each other by habit. Their love was not loud. It was not wild. It was built, plank by plank, day by day, in small kindnesses and the long memory of choosing each other again and again. They grew old there, just as they'd promised, with peace in their bones, purpose in their hands, and firelight on their faces long after the sun had gone down.